Okay. Oh, okay. We are recording. Okay. Good evening and welcome to another session. Tonight's session is going to be about self-destruction. Now, what's really interesting about this concept, this particular pattern of behavior, for some, unfortunately, it really can be the end of life. Which is one of the reasons why it's so vital to understand the patterns and what it is that, not so much that we indulge in, but it's the way that we live. And by not being conscious, the patterns continue without us ever getting any control over them. And this particular one, the self-destruction, really is very obvious, like all the other patterns, very detrimental. And this one is even more debilitating because you end up bringing yourself down and down and down. And some of the questions that came up when I was, working on the emotional self is, in what ways do you work against yourself? And I was thinking about that earlier. Now, some of the people, they indulge in overindulging in alcohol or overindulging in the drugs, recreational drugs. Some, I think we talked about gambling, which is another thing which tied into the denial and the depletion. And you can begin to see how some of these little patterns weave together to create a major mess. So here, it's a matter of sitting down and really questioning yourself, even though you might not think of it in terms of self-destruction, but you need to think about it in what ways are you hindering your own growth? In what ways are you working against yourself? And not only that, but what kind of behaviors are you creating that would have others not want to be in your life? Gambling, as we talked about, that could be one, addiction's another. Someone who is constantly argumentative. And I know people like that no matter what you say it's, the sky is blue. No, it's actually purple. Or you say the water is wet. No, it's actually slimy. So there will always be a source of contention. And part of that is coming from the individual who's working with the modality of rejection, because that is their goal, is to get that rejection. And obviously self-destruction is part of that particular pattern or that particular modus operandi, that way of getting their acceptance. So it's worthy to really contemplate and really look at it and try to figure out all the little nuances of the ways that you might weave it into your relationship. Not only your, personal relationship one-on-one, but with the kids, your co-workers, people that you are close to, because you will, like another pattern of rejection, you will push them away to the point of destroying the relationship. Because there's some past employees that you all may have worked with that will never talk to you again, or you'll bump into them at a trade show, as an example, because we just came back from a trade show. And I'm still friends with most of the people that I've ever stopped working with, because the approach, because I don't think I'm self-destructive. So my approach has always been, I love you. I even like you. Hate the patterns, but I like you. And however, we can't work together, period. And this is something Phyllis and I always say about people. And when we meet new people, or, even with our family members, hate the pattern, love the person. And there really is a difference, because we know that people are patternistic. And so you have to be able to separate the pattern from the person, because the person underneath everything may be, well, assuming, may be really a very wonderful, beautiful, loving, giving person. And yet they may have this pattern that turns you off, or because they're argumentative, or they're always trying to hurt themselves or hurt others, which takes us to the physical thing. So then self-destructive habits might be um, motorbiking, skydiving, motorcycling, race car, driver. So the question is, what kind of stuff do you do that borders on being dangerous because, you're looking for more excitement, more thrills? My dentist, one of them, Brad, is an extreme skier. He's actually one of those people that goes up in a helicopter and jumps out of the helicopter to ski down a mountain. So, to me, that's, crazy. I mean, I used to motorcycle, so I know, having had a couple of accidents, that that's very self-destructive. If I were to say, well, I could still do it, yes, but why? And then also on a physical level, do you involve others in that kind of dangerous and questionable behavior? That's something too that needs to be asked and needs to be looked at. Because oftentimes we will also involve others in what we do. I know I was friends with somebody, and we went to one of their brother's houses, and he had a Shelby Cobra. He said, "Come on, I'll take you for a ride." Well, I'm a high-speed driver, and I was never so terrified, because we went over a bridge blindly, and I realized at that moment that this was a very stupid thing I was doing, having faith in somebody else and him doing 100 miles an hour over a bridge, and we couldn't see what was on the other side. So some people, in seeking thrills, are self-destructive, and they will involve others to share their experience. Not necessarily a bright thing. When it comes to the material self, and again, whenever I think of material self, I always think about material sustenance as opposed to food. I think food could also be, I guess, be part of it, part of the material, but I think I would liken that more onto the physical self. But here, it's all about finances. So the question comes up, in what ways do you undermine yourself? Now remember, I'm not saying that you are doing this, but it's easier for me to speak as if I'm talking to you directly, that you are dealing with this, because it helps me in my mind in terms of communicating, but it's not really you personally. But so there may be certain things that you do materially, like I mentioned earlier, gambling, or you may have an expensive hobby that gets out of control. You may, addiction, we talked about that earlier. But there may be certain things that you do that tie into the pattern of depletion and the pattern of denial, which can lead you down the path to self-destruction and prevent you from having a comfortable, good life. And obviously, from the social self is another issue altogether. So I said here, what have you created what have you created that others don't include you? Interesting. So this may be that, you may create a particular habit, something that is socially offensive, and to the point where people end up rejecting you, not including you into the social circle or into the social conversations, because they don't know how to deal with your particular habit. Maybe there's a stutter. Maybe in social situations, you're forever butting in, creating, turning it around. It's all about you. Maybe your conversation is always seeing the downside of things, so that you never see the up, you never see the positive, but it's all about the down. And what that does is it brings others down to the point that they don't want to be a part of you, they don't want to be around you, they don't want to deal with you. So in that regard, the rejection that is generated, the rejection that you get, isolates you. And that in itself can lead down a very detrimental path, even to the point of suicide. And I'm familiar with suicide because we've had some in our family. So you can, it's it's almost easier, or you can see some of the things unfolding, and yet there's almost nothing you can do about it, because on some levels, if somebody's into self-destruction and loss of confidence and lack of self-esteem, sometimes it's very difficult to find the right words that will reach them. And you can talk until you're blue in the face, and yet nothing reaches them, because on some levels in their mind, they have gone down that path of self-destruction to the point that all they can see is decimation. They cannot get beyond that hurt, that pain, that unworthiness, that no desire to move forward. And those are all some of the kind of elements that lead to self-destruction. When it comes to the spiritual self, the only thing I thought about that is, a question of, have you turned away from God? Have you turned away from yourself? And again, this goes back to that lack of self-esteem, where people cannot see any value in who they are. They don't see their own beauty. They don't see their own potential. Sometimes we get so focused on the negative that we end up closing ourselves into a dark room and don't see any way out. We may have, turned to God and asked for help, asked for guidance, asked for the, support, send me the monthly check. And because nothing happened, there is that turning away from God. And actually, there's a story in our family where my grandfather, they had 2 boys, 4 girls, and the oldest son was 21, the younger son was 16, and apparently he had bought a gun to give to one of his sisters for protection. I don't know what the whole story there was, but the story goes that they were, my grandmother was in the kitchen, my grandfather wasn't there, but some of the kids were sitting around the table, and the oldest brother, Frank, wanted to see the gun, and as my Uncle Herbie gave him the gun, it went off and killed him. That destroyed my grandfather and turned him away from God. Apparently before then he was very religious, and he had a major lumberyard, a big business, construction company, and he just went downhill and gave up everything. And I don't know how long it was before he ever came around, but that was the story. When I grew up and got to know him, they were always in poverty. He had skills, he had abilities, but he couldn't hold on to money. And he turned away from God. So tragedy can do that. Sometimes we set the tragedy up. Sometimes we are caught up in somebody else's tragedy. So it's really good to question, what your relationship is with God, and not from a religious man-made point of view, but from your own personal point of view, in the sense of, do you from time to time give thanks to God for what you have and where you are and things of that nature. So self-destruction is a very difficult pattern. It's also very hard, like all patterns. Let me go there a minute. It's so much easier to see self-destructive behavior in others. Always easier. Every pattern we've ever talked about, I know you can see it. Now that you understand some of the aspects of a pattern, I know that you can see that in so many different people. You may see it in your coworkers, you may see it in family relatives. And if you're really good, you can see some aspects in yourself. But it's always much easier to see it in others than in self. That's one of the reasons why I asked you to really write these things down and try to spend some time throughout the week, because the pattern of distraction is an incredibly strong pattern that keeps you from going into the self and truly understanding the self and growing the self. So there's that. And by the way, if you have any questions, I say this all the time, don't hesitate. I turned up the volume so that if you do want to ask me a question and stop me in the middle of something, please feel free to do that. I tied in laziness to self-destruction. We could also tie it into the denial, into the depletion, because they kind of all patterns work together, so to speak. The real question is, which are the most dominant patterns in your personal life? And what I'm going through with you, let me go there, are things that I myself have gone through and going through. Because getting to the core of who we are, getting to that spiritual self that dwells within, is a matter of peeling back the layers, the defensive layers that we have built up to protect ourselves. But the reality is, in as much as you think you're protecting yourself, you're really imprisoning yourself from a different point of view. Because what we really want to do is be able to open up and allow our ego to dissipate into nothingness and allow our true spiritual self to be the self that manifests. So distraction keeps us from that, as well as some of our patterns. Laziness, like I said, is tied into the distraction, because you'll find all kinds of ways not to get involved. So when it came to laziness and working it within the emotional self, I asked in terms of, what are you unwilling to give? Because in reality, in a relationship and dealing with the emotional self, especially even with yourself, some people don't want to go within. And so they have all kinds of, I got this to do, all kinds of distractions. And I really don't have the time. Well, I think it's I forget, maybe Plato or Aristotle, maybe Confucius, who said, whenever you say I can't, it really is, I don't want to. So at any rate, the question is laziness. How is it at work in your life? Are you unwilling to give out energy, to give out empathy, a helping hand, if you will? Also, laziness can border on being inconsiderate of others, because it takes effort on some levels to care about other people, to participate in other people's lives, to help out. Now, not only on an emotional level, I guess it's giving somebody empathy or encouragement, accolades, because sometimes that's all a person needs to hear, is that you're grateful for what they've done, a thank you. And not doing that, what are you saving? What are you saving that energy of love for? So I attribute it to some degree to laziness. When it comes to the physical self, that's pretty apparent. Some people are couch potatoes, and some do as little as possible. And it's really funny, because on some levels, when I wrote that, it made me think about salespeople. Because from my point of view, there are 3 or 4 different types of salespeople. And the ones who do the little as possible, they're the get-by people, okay? Even from a physical level, they don't do any kind of exercise. Instead of parking at the far end of a lot to walk to a store, they'll park right up next to the store so that they don't have to walk a lot. They, there was a funny commercial on TV. I think it was for cricket, and the critter is talking on the phone and says, "Well, I can't come over. It's really far." And the other person says, "You're only 10 feet away." He says, "Yeah, but we got all this free time." Some folks, you got to look at laziness. Some people will find all kinds of excuses not to do stuff. They're the ones, we call the couch potatoes. They sit in front of either the computer all day long or the TV and just don't participate in life. Back to the salespeople. Those who do the least amount of work are what I call the get by people. And we have employees like that, not at my company, but I know, other companies and maybe even in some stores. I've had employees like that before, that they will do as little as possible. And whenever you look for them, they're usually in the back room, or they'll busy themselves with busy work doing nothing. So there's those. Then you have your order takers, and they'll only take an order if you give it. They won't even actually go and do the inventory to try to get an order out of you. And then you have your salespeople who will actually make a presentation and explain the product to you, maybe even go and do an inventory for you, make a recommendation. So there's all different levels of approach. You really need to see, which of your employees are lazy, which you do as little as possible, because on some levels, I think that it brings everybody else down, because especially if you allow it to continue and everybody sees who that person is and they see that they're just a get by person. They're there for the check. They have no real interest in participating or doing anything extraneous. So, and I actually worked for a boss once who told me he loved lazy people. And his rationale was, a lazy person will think of the fastest way with the least amount of effort to get something accomplished. That was his bottom line. So he said to me one day, we were talking, he said, "Look, if you can sit instead of stand, then sit to do the job. If you can lay down instead of sitting to do the job, then by all means, lay down." And that's when I said, "Morty, I mean, how can anybody?" And that's when he told me, lazy people will think of the shortcut. Well, being lazy also affects their material self, because they're not necessarily going to get ahead. They're not going to be promoted in their job. They may, again, like Morty said, think of a better way to do it, a lazy way that they don't have to. So maybe they would get a bonus, but I don't know that they would get promoted without showing initiative, without showing results. And because they're doing as little as possible, their reward, we get back what we give out. Not always. Sometimes we get back a lot less, but there's other energies involved in that kind of a transaction. There's karma there. There's things to work out, things to understand. However, rule of thumb is, if you're a worker and you demonstrate vitality and you demonstrate consciousness, then there's going to be a material reward. So laziness is something just to be very mindful of. In the social self, this is almost borders on the pattern of withdrawal. And if we haven't covered that yet, we will, because that's a whole other animal. I think it does sound familiar that maybe we have covered it. Because, there are, I think I told you this, there's something like 25 to 30 different patterns of behavior. So it's hard to keep track of all of them. But laziness would also turn into withdrawal, especially in the social self, where, it's just, it's too much effort to go out. It's cold out. It's rainy out. I really don't like that restaurant. You know what? I really don't want to socialize with that other couple. And so we find excuses not to participate. And so we minimize our time being with others. And the drawback there is that you don't sharpen or grow your communication skills, your socialization skills, your humanity from a different point of view, because you end up withdrawing into the self. And then, of course, one can become delusional based on that and have conversations with yourself and think that, that's everything. And then from the spiritual self, where I brought laziness to that was really just something very simple, and that was just not bothering reading, spiritual work, not bothering going to a church, a synagogue, a center, not bothering to question. Just, and again, this goes back to the get by person, because you must question. The more you question yourself about why do you have this attitude about that, why do you feel this way about that, the more that you question yourself, the more that you will learn about yourself, the more that you know about yourself, the more in control you can be. And being in control, and what I mean by that is not necessarily being a control freak, but being in control of your emotional responses. In the Gospel according to Thomas, I think I've told you this before, Jesus taught, be passers-by. And what he meant by that was not getting involved in an emotional situation. If you see something going on, and sometimes it's very hard not to get involved because there's such maybe an injustice going on. However, we know of stories where, a guy and a girl could be fighting and going at it. He slaps her and she's crying and somebody else jumps in, hey, you shouldn't do that. And the guy turns around and beats him up or shoots him or stabs him. And so when emotions are out of control, that is when the dark forces are operating at their maximal level. We are the children of light. And because we are in a plane of duality, there are children of darkness. Both are the children of God. That's the yin and yang, the up, the down, the in, the out, the black, the white, the positive, the negative. So we're light, they're darkness. Now, the children of light have chosen to come into the material plane. And when we are in the material plane, we are co-creating our reality by using our mind, our electromagnetic mind, to draw to us those congealed atoms, those molecules, those substances, those entities, people, places, well, not places, well, places too have an energy and a vibration. But we draw to us that which we need, or we reject that which we need, okay, in both instances, because depending upon the pattern of behavior, your mind being a goal-seeking device, each pattern of behavior has an end result for each particular self. And your mind will set in motion, from an energetic, electromagnetic perspective, send out those waves to either repel opportunities, people, situations, and in the repelling, it brings about laziness, as an example. So that, oh, okay, I don't have to do anything. There's nothing here that I have to deal with. Yet that was the exact goal of that pattern of behavior, which validated the concept in your subconscious mind that said, you're lazy. And so you set in motion that. This is also in part of the teaching of ask and you shall receive. what people don't understand is that they're asking at a deeper subconscious level, because your subconscious mind is truly your greater mind. It is much more powerful than your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind is constantly manipulating you and everyone in your life and energy all around you to fulfill your expectations as to not only how you think you should be, but how you think everybody else should be. And there's the other teaching where Jesus says, like I said, in Gospel, in Thomas, is be a passerby, don't get involved emotionally. In the King James Version, it's not what you eat that defiles you, it's what proceedeth from the heart. It's the things that you say emotionally. If you've ever read any of the Carlos Castaneda books, the Don Juan books, Don Juan will tell you that the lines of power, and this is where the emotions come in, we are plugged into the material plane through our emotions. And this is what allows the children of dark to manipulate us. It is through the emotions. That's why when you see emotional turmoil, it's best to avoid it so that you don't get caught up into it. I know you may want to listen to that a couple of times. It really is, it's fascinating the way that it works. And I think that once you get a handle on that, and you can begin, again, it'll be easier to see in other people how they themselves set themselves up for a depletion, for a denial, for a rejection, as well as those who set themselves up to get caught up in sacrifice or the success failure pattern. I know you can see these things. And by the way, the more that you make the effort to look for them, the easier they will become to see, which will help you in seeing more of yourself and elevate your levels of understanding and your levels of compassion, because you'll know, that's what they're going through. And where that can take you is, okay, now that I understand what they're going through, how can I help them overcome that? What can I do to facilitate their understanding of what they're dealing with? Now, keep in mind, not everybody's going to want to hear what you have to say. So that may take you into a place of rejection. Let's see, how are we doing on time? Okay, good. I think we can cover desperation. And this is really something, I think I told you the story that I did something out of desperation, and where that takes you is into disappointment and dissatisfaction. Or is it that they take you to desperation? Again, the interconnection of these patterns is just really absolutely fascinating. But in terms of desperation, looking at it from the emotional self, the question here is, how does this work in your emotional self? What do you think you're missing? What is it that you think that you need? And based on that, and again, we're talking about the emotional self, what are you willing to get it? What are you willing to do to get whatever it is you think you need, or whatever it is that you think you're missing? And the last question on that is, why do you think you need it? You know, there are some people who think that they just need a lot of people in their lives to, I don't know, make them feel good about themselves. I have family like that. I have a cousin and a wife. They're probably the most social people I know. They are out and they work, they full-time job, but every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, they are out socializing, out to dinner, out to parties. And I don't know. What I do find, what I do think is that most people think, feel that they have an emptiness within. This is why money for some people is their God. They're trying to get as much money as they possibly can to fill that emptiness within. Some use drugs to escape it. I can't never, I feel so empty and I can't fulfill it. So let me just avoid trying to deal with that and escape into fantasy land. Others may use sex as a way of trying to fill that emptiness. The reality, or food is yet another way. But the reality is there is no emptiness, there is no hole. And the reason I say that, how can there be when we're all a child of God? So if there is something that we think we're missing or that we think that we need it, then you really need to question first and foremost, why do you think you need it? And just how desperate are you to get it? What are you willing to do to achieve it? Because out of desperation, you're going to give up something. You'll give up your freedom, you'll give up your dignity, you'll give up your integrity. You will, when you're desperate, you will do whatever it takes to fulfill that hole, that emptiness. On a physical self, again, it comes down to the same thing on the emotional self, except here on the physical level. What are you willing to do to achieve your goal? And again, why do you think you need it? And one example might be somebody who thinks that, well, I need to have an Arnold Schwarzenegger physique. I need to be toned. I can't have an ounce of fat. I've got to be muscular. I go to the gym Tuesdays, Thursdays. There's a guy there that doesn't have one iota of fat. He is so cut. He is so muscular. On some levels, I think he doesn't look healthy. His face is so drawn. And I wonder, what is he trying to achieve? And what is he going through that he feels he needs that kind of a body for what? So we do things to ourselves physically. That's one example of one. Maybe somebody is a constant runner or doing something on a physical level, again, to satisfy that need. I'm desperate to get that done. I'm desperate to look fabulous, whatever the case may be. And again, it comes down to, why do they think they need it? And then, of course, materially, financially, and then, what are you willing to sacrifice? And look at how many executives are willing to give up their families, give up their happiness, their love, their kids to make a buck, to be the top of the mountain. Angie and I know people in our industry who have, a man I worked for, left an $800 million estate to his girlfriend, cut his family out. He was miserable. He became miserable. He was unhappy because we had many talks. And his whole thing was work, 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 to the point of sacrificing his health and his life for a dollar bill. And guess what? He couldn't take 15 cents of it with him. Did him no good. Did he grow as a human being? Questionable. Did he grow as a spiritual being? Certainly not. Remember, there's a couple of, in Matthew 16:26, and I have it here on the screen, it says, "For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Okay? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? People sacrifice themselves for a dollar bill. Remember, Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. And mammon, unbeknownst known to, I don't know what, I was going to say 90% of the Christian faith. I don't know. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. Maybe actually there are some ministers, preachers, fathers, priests, whatever the terminology may be, that are actually saying to people, Don't work so much. Stop serving Mammon. Mammon is the Persian god of riches. We are a country, in my opinion, that serves Mammon. We are willing, kids kill for a new pair of sneakers. I mean, literally, kill another kid to take his brand new pair of sneakers. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we desperate for in a material way? What are we willing to sacrifice to get what we want? And again, the question always has to be, in this particular aspect of self, or in this particular segment, I seem to be focusing in on, why do you think you need it? And actually, we could take that, why do you think you need it, and apply that to every aspect of the material self in every single pattern. Well, no, it's not appropriate, because you don't need denial, you don't need disappointment, you don't need dissatisfaction, and you don't need desperation either, but you do need to understand what you're desperate for and what you're willing to do to get it. Socially, I put in a quote here from Lao Tzu: care about what other people think, and you will always be their prisoner. And some people are desperate to be accepted by others. What's that about? Where is that coming from? What is the emptiness that you think, that you need others to accept you? Maybe just by being yourself, being your true self, understanding who you are, people will flock to you. Why? Because they'll sense that there's a vibration about you, one of peace, one of being centered. Maybe there'll be a glow about you, a light about you. And so that there is no desperation for acknowledgement from others, because being whole and, well, we're not whole and complete. I don't know if I ever told you this, that women are whole but not complete. Men are complete but not whole. That's why the two must become as one. That's why unity is so vital. Not only unity between male and female, but also the male and female within yourself, so that at some point you can look out at life without a gendered, look out at life with a genderless perspective. And then the other form of unity is understanding that you are a spiritual being in a material body, and looking at life from a very balanced, harmonious perspective. But back to the social self, what are you willing to do that to gain that acceptance by others? I think it was Lenny Bruce who did a skit on that. And I know some of you kids can remember Lenny Bruce. And he said something that, this kid went down to Atlantic City, down to the shore, and he wanted to be accepted by others, so he became gay just to be accepted. So if you're caught up in that feeling of needing others for maybe a sense of validation, because sometimes that's why people need others, and they do what they do so that people can validate them from a social point of view, some from a material point of view, others from an emotional point of view. And again, it comes down to, since one might be looking for acceptance, why do you think you need it from others? When in reality, you need to first accept yourself. True love, there's different forms of love, and the most ideal form of love that each and every one of us can grow into, and hopefully will grow into, is divine love. And this is what Jesus demonstrated, that it didn't matter who you were, what you were about, the color of your skin, or your belief system. Those were all immaterial. But to totally accept you for who you are and where you're at, that's kind of a divine love, because there's an understanding that you are a part of the God force. You are a child of God. That's divine love. Then, of course, we have our emotional love. And a lot of that, in a lot of relationships, they are often based on the concept of unity as was presented by the parents. So some of us guys marry our moms, some of the ladies marry their dads. It's just the way it is. And then, of course, I mean, that's going from the approval as a form of acceptance. And then, of course, from the rejection as a form of acceptance, it's the exact opposite. You know, the girls will marry somebody who is the exact opposite of dad. And the moms or the boys will marry somebody who's the exact opposite of mom. So there really is a need to understand where you're coming from, which patterns are at work, and if desperation is one of them, because it's such a strong motivator that could cost you, as I said earlier, your integrity, your morals, your finances, whatever, it's really worth investigating and questioning. And be mindful of those in your circle, in your family, in your business who work with you, for you, or you work for. Be careful of their patterns because they will suck you into them, they will involve you, and they could end up depleting you. And I'm going to end on the last part of this with the spiritual self. And here, you know, the questions, I had a couple of different questions that I wrote, and then I'll read something to you. But the thing I said is, some people are desperate from a spiritual point of view, from a man-made religious point of view, wanting God or Jesus or Buddha or Shiva or Ganesh, wanting them to handle their problems. Oh, and I've heard people say that, and I know you've heard people say that. I've heard ministers say, give it to Jesus, you know, give it to God, and it'll be taken care of. Well, no, it's not. And that's one of the things that could lead people away. Then, of course, there's some of the televangelists who will, you know, give it to Jesus and send $1,000 here, and you know your problem's going to be handled. And out of fear, people do these things. People are desperate not to go to hell. They all want to go to heaven. They all want to be a good religious person. And yet, what did Jesus teach? The kingdom is within you. It's not outside of you. Man teaches that it's outside of you, but it's within you. So, and I said, well, why do you think you need them to do it for you? That was the other thing I wrote down, because here's what is in Genesis in chapter 1, verse 26. And I'll talk about this. Okay, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Genesis 1:26. Symbolically, and that's how you have to read the Bible. That's how you have to read your life. That's how you have to read your dreams. That's how you have to read the occurrences, the events, the situations, the accidents, the happenings, the things your mind draws your attention to on a daily basis as symbolic representations of energy at work. So, interesting statement. Let us. So who's the us? Now, I have a friend, Pastor Greg, who I work with and have done health shows for him. He says, well, that's the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. You talk to the people who believe in aliens, well, it's the aliens sitting around a table saying, you know, hey guys, let's get together. Let's make this creature in our image. So I don't remember if it's Aristotle or Plato or one of those guys said, one of the things about man is he makes his gods in his own image. Okay? So the real thing here is the image that God is talking about is our spirit, our soul. That is the true image of God that's within us. That's where Jesus is coming in with Luke 17:21. The kingdom of God is within you. That's the likeness that you have. And because of that, we have dominion over everything. So we are co-creating our reality. If you want it, don't ask for it, co-create it. You're already doing that, except what's happening is that what you're co-creating is the fulfillment of your expectations, which is the end result of your patterns of behavior, which are there validating your concepts in your subconscious mind, even when they're working against you, even when they're not true, even when they're man-made teachings and not in harmony with the universal teachings. Nonetheless, it is written that we have dominion over everything, the fish of the sea. And it's really interesting that the sign, one of the signs of Christianity is the fish. Well, the sea is our material life. Therefore, fish are our material thoughts in the material plane. The fowl of the air is symbolic of spirit, so the fowl is symbolic of our spiritual thoughts. They're lofty. They have wings. They can soar to great heights. Cattle over the earth is sustenance. The earth is symbolic of the material plane. Cattle gives us food, clothing, shelter, cow's milk, the land, God said to Abram, or before he became Abraham, I will take you to a land of milk and honey. Milk is symbolic of sustenance. Honey is the sweetness of life. Nonetheless, what's being taught here is that we have dominion over everything. And every creepy thing and everything that creepeth upon the earth, these are thoughts, all at different levels. Again, some of your thoughts are lofty. Some of them are very mundane. They don't have to have dominion over you. You have dominion over them. The sad part is that even though we as human beings have dominion over everything because we are the most conscious, co-creating energy in the material plane, 99.9% do not have conscious control over that energy. So work with the material, eliminate desperation. If it is a part of your journey, try to understand what it is that you think you need. What do you think achieving it will give you? And really be mindful of what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're willing to do to achieve it. And remember, there is no emptiness within. If there is a feeling of that, it's because you were taught that. You were made to feel that, but it is not the truth. On that note, I will leave you all with a, I don't know what this is. I think we can have one more Sunday before the holidays, and then we'll take a break and come back after the first of the year. So everybody have a fabulous holiday. Yeah, we'll be able to, the 17th. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we'll meet Sunday night. That'll be before Christmas. So next Sunday will be our last meeting for the year. So in the meantime, work with the information. Keep working on yourself. Know that you're a part of God. Know that you're wonderful. Know that you've got this power. Focus your mind to achieve your goals. And above all, be safe and be loving. And we love you. And give us everything.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Michael. Good night.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being here.
That was a lot tonight. I'm going to listen again.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.